The first thing I fixed every morning was never a book. It was the front door of my shop because the hinge had learned to scream in a way that made customers apologize before they stepped inside. I kept telling myself I would replace it when the month ended with money left over, and every month ended with me pressing my thumb against the rent envelope and doing arithmetic that felt like punishment. So I fixed the door the way I fixed most things in my life, with a small screwdriver, a strip of brass tape, and a promise to come back to the problem later. My name was Min-jae, 29 years old, Omega, owner of a narrow book repair studio tucked between a noodle shop and a laundromat in Uljiro. The sign above my door said, "Paper House," because I had chosen it at 23 when I still believed sincerity could do half the work of marketing. I repaired damaged books, rebound family albums, made tactile picture books for children who needed raised lines and sturdy pages, and occasionally restored documents for people rich enough to call a torn menu from 1981 part of their family heritage. Most mornings I boiled barley tea in a dented kettle, checked the humidity gauge by the window, watered one stubborn basil plant, and wrote the day's unpaid bills on a pad small enough to make them look less intimidating. That Tuesday began with rain in the gutter, and a text from my sister asking whether I had eaten breakfast. So Yon never asked because she wanted the answer. She asked because she knew I lied when I said yes, and she liked to catch me being noble in a pathetic way. She was 22, a nursing student, sharper than a needle, and the only person alive who could make me feel 11 years old by sending one emoji. I sent her a photograph of half a kimbap roll next to my cutting mat. She replied, "That is evidence, not food." I smiled despite myself and packed the finished tactile atlas for the Children's Literacy Foundation near Hanyum. Each page had taken 3 weeks, continents raised in smooth polymer, rivers stitched with blue thread, mountain ranges built from layered paper that had to be firm enough for small fingers and soft enough not to cut them. The foundation had paid a deposit, not enough to cover the clinic bill for my mother's new medication, but enough to keep the shop's electricity from being cut. The remaining payment would arrive after a private donor event that evening, assuming the board liked the final work and no one decided a poor Omega in a patched coat had overvalued his labor. The coat had belonged to my father. Brown wool, frayed cuffs, one hidden pocket he had sewn himself after losing his wallet twice in the same winter. I wore it because it was warm and because grief became practical if you kept using what the dead left behind. My father had died 4 years earlier with 2 boxes of repair tools, 3 bad jokes, and a debt he had not actually signed. The loan company insisted otherwise. My uncle insisted he had only tried to help. The stamped documents looked real enough to make lawyers expensive, and I had learned that forged debt did not need to be true if it was heavy enough. By noon, the rain became serious. It slapped the shop windows and made the noodle shop's neon sign blur red on the pavement. I wrapped the atlas in waxed cloth, tucked it under my arm, and locked Paper House with 2 keys and 1 habit of prayer I would never admit to anyone. At the bus stop, a woman with a stroller struggled with the wind, so I held my umbrella over the baby while she folded the plastic cover. She thanked me 3 times. I told her once was plenty. The baby stared at me with the solemn judgment of a tiny landlord. The foundation event was hosted in a glass building where even the umbrellas looked expensive. I arrived through the service entrance because that was where deliveries went, even when the delivery was 3 weeks of careful labor instead of a box of wine. A young beta coordinator named Park Yun-sil signed for the atlas and whispered that it was beautiful. She was the kind of tired office worker who held 3 pens at once and had a headset mark pressed into her hair. I liked her immediately. "You should stay for the presentation," she said. "The donor asked to see the maker." "The maker has a glue on his sleeve," I said. "It's a literacy foundation. We can survive glue." That was how I ended up standing near the back of a reception hall, holding a paper cup of coffee that tasted like boiled apology, while donors discussed early childhood access as though kindness had been invented by committees. I was used to rooms like that. People praised craft when it sat under flattering lights, then looked past the craftsman when he stood too close to the buffet. An older alpha woman touched the raised mountains on the atlas and said, "Charming, very rustic." I thanked her because my rent did not allow honesty. Near the windows, a tall man in a dark suit spoke with 3 foundation directors. I noticed him before I knew his name because the space around him arranged itself differently. People leaned in and stepped back with the same motion, like birds responding to a shadow. He had a still face, black hair combed without softness, and hands that rested at his sides as if he trusted them to do nothing until needed. A discreet security guard stood 10 paces behind him. Another waited near the service door. When the man turned, his gaze passed over the room with the thoroughness of someone counting exits rather than admiring decor. "Yeo Tae-gun," Yunsil murmured when she caught me looking. "CEO of Yeo Hanul Holdings, main donor this year." "Is he the donor who asked to see the maker?" "No, he's the donor everyone wishes had asked to see them." I made a non-committal sound and looked back at the atlas. Men like him did not belong in my day unless they were standing behind a podium. Their watches paid my clinic bills for a year. Their family names appeared in business articles and in whispered conversations where people lowered their voices around words like redevelopment, private security, and prosecutors. I had repaired enough old ledgers for old families to know that respectable wealth sometimes kept a second set of records. I escaped to the hallway after the presentation, intending to breathe for 2 minutes and then collect the payment papers. The rain had grown loud enough to rattle the glass entrance. In the lobby, a child cried near the revolving doors. He was perhaps 7, wearing a school uniform under a too thin cardigan, his face blotched with panic. 2 staff members tried to ask his name, but he kept turning toward the street as if someone had vanished there. I crouched several steps away, not close enough to frighten him. "I'm Min-jae," I said. "I fix books. That is less useful than fixing elevators, but more useful than staring." His sob hitched. "My aunt was here." "Is your aunt inside or outside?" "I don't know." That is a terrible answer for both of us. I held out my paper cup. "This coffee is bad and cold, so I don't recommend drinking it, but you can hold it if your hands need a job." He took it. His small fingers shook around the cup. I asked him to describe his aunt's shoes because frightened children sometimes remember details adults ignored. "Red heels," he said. "A white umbrella with blue letters. A cough when she laughed." I was still asking questions when the glass doors opened and wind drove rain across the polished floor. The child flinched. Instinct made me shift my body between him and the door. A woman in red heels rushed in 30 seconds later, soaked and terrified, followed by a security guard. The child ran to her. She cried harder than he had. I stood, damp at the knees, and discovered that my father's coat had absorbed half the lobby floor. Its old lining sagged. One cuff had torn completely. "Your sleeve," a voice said beside me. Yeo Tae-gun stood close enough for me to see a faint scar near his jaw. Up close, he looked less like a photograph and more like a man who slept badly without allowing the world to file a complaint. "It's had a long career," I said. He removed his jacket. It was black cashmere, heavy, warm, tailored to a life where no one asked the price. Before I understood his intention, he placed it over my shoulders. I stepped back so quickly one sleeve slid down my arm. "No, thank you. You are soaked." "It's rain, not acid." "The child's aunt is my cousin's wife. She should not have lost sight of him. That is a family problem. You prevented it from becoming a worse one." Then tell your family to watch children instead of donating speeches." His guard made a tiny movement. Tae-gun did not. His eyes stayed on my face, measuring something I had not offered for inspection. Then he adjusted the jacket without touching my neck. "Return it to the front desk tomorrow," he said. "I can dry clean it. You can return it." That should have been the end of Yeo Tae-gun in my life. A rich man had given me a jacket because rain made charity easy. I went home with the garment folded over my arm like contraband, hung it near the heater, and spent 20 minutes staring at it because the lining was finer than anything I owned. In the inside pocket, I found a black card with embossed silver letters and an address in Seongbuk-dong. No phone number, no assistant's name, just Yeo Tae-gun and the address, as if anyone who received the card would know what to do. So Yeon video called while I was brushing rain from my father's coat. She narrowed her eyes at the black jacket in the background. "Please tell me you did not steal a chaebol's clothing. He placed it on me in public. Theft requires more ambition." "Who?" "Yeo Tae-gun." Her mouth opened. She lowered her voice, though she was alone in the dorm laundry room. "That Yeo family. There are many Yeo families." "Appa." "Yes," I admitted. "That Yeo family." She sat back, a washing machine spinning behind her. "Return it by courier." I was told to return it to the front desk. People like that don't have front desks. They have gates and men who memorize your pulse. I laughed because she was trying to sound dramatic and because she was not entirely wrong. After we ended the call, I checked the clinic portal. My mother's medication charge had posted. The number sat there with the serene violence of official billing. I opened my bank app, closed it, then opened it again, as if shame might have made a deposit. The loan company called at 8:17 p.m. I knew because the wall clock above my workbench had stopped 2 months earlier at 8:17, and whenever they called, it felt like time agreed with them. The man on the phone had a soft voice and a habit of saying my sister's university name as though it were a threat. "Your uncle is worried," he said. "My uncle can send fruit if he's worried. He says you are refusing a reasonable refinancing offer. My uncle forged my father's seal. Careful with accusations, Min-jae. Careful with my sister's address." He chuckled. "Then pay by Friday." I hung up and stood in my shop among drying paper and tiny clamps, wearing a rich man's jacket over my ordinary shirt because it had not finished drying. It smelled faintly of cedar and rain. I hated that I noticed. I hated more that for one absurd minute I felt safer inside it, as if fabric could argue with debt. The next morning, I put the jacket into a garment bag borrowed from the laundromat owner and took the subway to Seongbuk-dong. The address led me to a walled property with a gate made of dark metal and stone posts that looked older than most laws. A camera turned toward me. A guard stepped out of a booth and asked for my name before I reached the intercom. Min-jae, I came to return Mr. Yeo's jacket. The guard's expression did not change, but the second guard looked at the garment bag as if it contained a legal confession. After a brief call, the gate opened. The house beyond was not a mansion in the vulgar sense. It was worse, restrained, quiet, expensive enough not to advertise. The courtyard held pine trees cut into patient shapes. Rainwater shone on black stone. I followed a woman in a gray suit through a side entrance and into a hallway where every object appeared to have survived 3 generations by learning to keep secrets. I intended to hand over the jacket, sign nothing, bow once, and leave before my shoes embarrassed me on the polished floor. Instead, an elderly woman in a cream hanbok appeared at the end of the hall and stopped as if I had walked out of a family portrait. For 3 seconds, no one spoke. Then she said, "So he finally sent you here himself." I looked behind me. No one else had entered. "I'm sorry?" Her gaze moved from my face to the garment bag, then to my hands. "With the winter jacket? Bold of him. I only came to return it." "Of course," she said, in a tone that suggested returning jackets was how secret marriages announced themselves in her family. The woman in the gray suit murmured, "Madam, Director Yeo has not arrived yet." The elderly woman ignored her. "What is your name?" Min-jae. "Family." "Mine?" A younger man laughed somewhere behind a sliding door. The sound was quickly cut off as if someone had stepped on it. The elderly woman approached. She was smaller than me, but carried authority the way some people carried perfume, leaving no part of the room untouched. "I am Yeo Tae-gun," she said, "Tae-gun's grandmother." I bowed so fast the garment bag swung against my knee. "I apologize for arriving without an appointment. Mr. Yeo told me to return this to the front desk, but there wasn't exactly a front desk, and then the gate." "Did he let you wear it?" "He put it over my shoulders because I was wet." Several faces appeared, then disappeared along the corridor. I realized we had an audience. I also realized, too late, that the jacket might have meant something inside this household that it did not mean outside it. Yeo Tae-gun's eyes sharpened. "Tae-gun does not lend that jacket. That sounds like a conversation for Mr. Yeo. It is his father's memorial jacket." My fingers tightened around the hanger. The hallway seemed to tilt half a degree. "I didn't know." "He knows." Before I could find a respectful answer, doors opened at the far end of the hall. Yeo Tae-gun entered with two aides behind him, wearing a charcoal overcoat and the expression of a man who had been told a fire had started, but not which building. He saw me. His gaze dropped to the garment bag. Then it moved to his grandmother, to the watching relatives, and back to me. "Min-jae," he said. "Your front desk is complicated." A corner of his mouth changed, not enough to be called amusement by any generous court. "So I see." His grandmother turned on him. "You did not inform the household." "There was nothing to inform. You gave him that jacket. He was cold. A man does not give his father's memorial jacket to a stranger because of weather." I raised one hand. This stranger would like to leave before the weather becomes family law. The younger man behind the sliding door failed to hide another laugh. Tae-gun looked toward him, and the laugh died with admirable discipline. His grandmother's voice lowered. "The council meets in 6 days. You rejected the Han alliance, refused the Che register, and now an Omega arrives carrying your father's jacket. Am I expected to pretend coincidence has developed manners?" The hallway changed. I did not understand the details, but I understood pressure. It lived in shoulders, in swallowed words, in aides going still. Tae-gun's face revealed almost nothing. His right hand, however, curled once before relaxing. "Min-jae is not part of this," he said. Yeo Tae-gun looked at me. "Is that true?" "Yes," I said. Then, because poverty had made me allergic to being discussed like furniture, I added, "I am part of returning a jacket. A very meaningful jacket, apparently, which should have come with written warnings." The younger man behind the door stepped out. He looked around to Tae-gun's age, handsome in a looser, brighter way, with a bruise of fatigue under one eye. "Grandmother, perhaps we shouldn't interrogate a guest before tea." "Jae-ryul," Tae-gun said. The younger man lifted both hands. "I said tea, not treason." That was my introduction to Yeo Jae-ryul, Tae-gun's cousin, family diplomat, and professional survivor of rooms where everyone owned sharper knives than they displayed. He guided me toward a sitting room, while Tae-gun spoke with his grandmother in low tones behind us. I should have refused tea. I should have left the jacket on a chair and walked out. Instead, I sat because the guard by the door had the polite posture of someone who would not stop me unless instructed, and because my legs needed 30 seconds to remember their job. I was still trying not to smile when Tae-gun entered. Alone, without aides, he seemed taller because the room gave him fewer places to put his authority. He shut the door but did not sit immediately. "I apologize," he said. "For the jacket or the grandmother?" "For failing to consider that bringing the jacket here would involve you in family assumptions." "That is a polished sentence. How long did it take to become that evasive?" Jae-ryul choked on tea. Tae-gun's eyes remained on me. "Less time than it took you to become reckless." "I prefer direct. Direct people often mistake impact for accuracy, and controlled people often mistake omission for courtesy." Jae-ryul looked from one of us to the other with an expression I recognized from customers, watching me decide whether a moldy book could be saved. "I should find a less flammable room," he said, and left before either of us answered. Tae-gun sat across from me. "My grandmother believes I have hidden a spouse." "Because of a jacket?" "Because of that jacket, the timing of your arrival, and several decisions I made before you entered this house." "That sounds like your problem wearing my shoes." "It is." He paused. "I will correct it." "Good." I pushed the garment bag toward him. "Correct it quickly." He looked at the bag but did not touch it. "The correction may create a different problem." I almost laughed. That is the most family business sentence I have ever heard. He did not smile. "There is a council vote in 6 days regarding my succession as chair of the Yeo Foundation and controlling director of the holding company. My father's will includes a condition inserted by my grandfather. The successor must establish a legally recognized household independent of the older branches. It was designed to prevent puppet heirs. Marry or lose power. Register a spouse or relinquish voting control to a family committee." "And the committee is bad?" "The committee includes people who use charitable foundations as laundering rooms, construction permits as weapons, and debt ledgers as leashes." The word debt slipped under my ribs like wire. Tae-gun noticed. Of course he noticed. Men like him built empires from noticing what others wished hidden. "I rejected an arranged alliance last night," he continued. "My grandmother accepted it poorly. Your arrival gave her another explanation." "Then tell her I am a damp bookbinder who made poor transportation choices." "She may believe that. Others will not. They will ask why I let a stranger wear my father's jacket. If I say kindness, they will search for a motive. If they fail to find one, they will create one." "Again, your family's hobby is not my employment." "No." His gaze held mine. "It could become a proposal. There are moments when language arrives in a room wearing someone else's shoes." I stared at him, then at the tea, then back at him. "No. I have not made it yet. I'm saving time." "For whom?" "For both of us, unless you enjoy being refused in detail." This time something like amusement touched his face and vanished. "A temporary legal arrangement. 6 months, public marriage, private boundaries, separate rooms, no expectation of intimacy, full legal representation for you from counsel unrelated to my family, compensation structured as legitimate consulting fees, protection if needed." I stood. "You researched me." "Not yet." "That is somehow worse." "I saw your reaction to the word debt." "My reaction is none of your business." "It became my concern when my family began speaking your name in a hallway." "My name can leave the hallway with me." I walked to the door. He did not block me. That mattered, though I did not want it to. He simply said, "A man named Choi Dae-sik called your shop twice this morning from a number associated with Goryeo Mutual Recovery. One of my security staff ran the number after he saw you admitted through the gate." I turned slowly. "You had security run my calls?" "Your shop number is public. The call pattern is not difficult to identify. That sentence does not improve the sentence before it. You are right. He accepted the criticism without flinching. I should not have allowed it before asking. The apology did not soften me. It complicated my anger, which was worse. Goodbye, Mr. Yeo. Take this. He placed a card on the table. Not for marriage, for a lawyer. If your father's seal was forged, you need someone who can challenge the debt before they use collection to pressure your sister. I hated him for saying my fear so precisely. And what will that cost? Nothing, if you refuse everything else. I caused exposure today. I will correct that much. People who cause fires often enjoy selling extinguishers. Yes, he said. So take it to someone you trust before calling. I left with my father's coat on my shoulders and Tae-gun's card in my pocket, feeling as if I had returned one jacket and accidentally accepted the weight of another. At the gate, Jae-ryul appeared beside the guard and offered me a paper bag. Rice cakes, he said. Also a warning. If my family decides you are useful, they will smile before they touch anything sharp. Are you smiling? I'm exhausted. It resembles smiling in dim light. I took the bag. Why warn me? Because Tae-gun gave you the jacket. That still means something to everyone except me. Jae-ryul looked toward the house. His father wore it the night he refused to sign over voting control. He died 3 weeks later in an accident that taught the family many wrong lessons. Tae-gun has not let anyone touch it since the funeral. The air felt colder than the rain. Then he should have left me wet. Probably. Jae-ryul's voice softened. He is usually better at being cruel to himself than kind to anyone else. You disrupted a habit. I did not answer. I went home, opened the shop late, and pretended customers had not noticed my face. By evening, 3 things had happened. The foundation transferred the remaining payment. The loan company sent a photograph of So-yeon leaving campus, taken from across the street. And a woman named attorney Seo Hye-jin, whose office address occupied a building I had once entered only to repair a chairman's memoir, called and said Yeo Tae-gun had prepaid a consultation under my name with no reporting rights to him. No reporting rights? I repeated. None. He asked whether that could be written into the engagement letter. I told him it already was. Men enjoy requesting what professional ethics require. I liked her immediately, too. I met her the next afternoon. She was a beta in her 40s with silver-rimmed glasses and the calm impatience of someone who billed by the hour but cared about the answer. She reviewed copies of the debt documents, the seal impression, my father's medical records from the week he supposedly signed, and my uncle's messages. Then she removed her glasses and said, "This is filthy." Legal term? Emotional term. Legally, it is fraud if we can prove procurement and coercion. The difficulty is that the company holding the debt has friends. Do the friends have names? They have holding companies, which is worse. She slid a sheet toward me. One name sat halfway down the page, Yeo Development Advisory, a branch subsidiary connected to the committee Tae-gun had mentioned. My throat tightened. I didn't know, I said. I believe you. That's a luxury. It's a professional assessment. You look angry, not guilty. Attorney Seo explained options, injunctions, document examination, complaints, pressure points. Each word cost money. Each form required time. Time was the only thing debt collectors never gave. By the end, she did not tell me to marry Yeo Tae-gun. She simply said, "If someone with his resources wants to separate you from this debt, ask why, ask what he gains, and put every answer in writing." I went to the hospital before returning to the shop. My mother was asleep, one hand curled near her cheek, and So-yeon sat beside her with textbooks across her knees. I told my sister about the lawyer, the forged debt, and finally the marriage proposal I had tried to hide because older brothers are often idiots with good intentions. She was furious in the way frightened people become furious when they love you. She said, I always made myself the door everyone else escaped through. I said the men threatening her had already photographed her campus. She answered that silence had not protected her either. By the time we stopped whispering, neither of us had won. She only made me promise that if I considered Tae-gun's offer, she would get a say in her own risk. I spent that night at Paper House with 3 cups of tea gone cold beside me and the jacket's absence occupying the room. At midnight, I called the number on Tae-gun's card. He answered on the second ring, as if sleep was another department he supervised poorly. Ha, Min-jae. Do you greet everyone like you're reading a court record? Only people who call after midnight. I want terms. A pause. Paper shifted. Come to my office tomorrow at 10. Bring Attorney Seo if you choose. I will bring Attorney Seo. I will also bring a list. I expected that. Expect longer. Good. His office occupied the upper floors of a tower near Gwanghwamun, where the elevators rose so smoothly my ears popped without sound. Attorney Seo arrived in a navy suit and the expression of a woman prepared to bill someone into honesty. Tae-gun's conference room had a table long enough to host a minor treaty. He sat at one end with his counsel, a sharp-eyed Omega man named Yong Il-do, who greeted Attorney Seo as a former classmate and me as if I were not absurd for being there. I placed my handwritten list on the table. Tae-gun read it without comment. No physical obligation, I said. No shared bedroom except in emergencies staged for outsiders, and those require prior notice. No medical decisions on my behalf. No surveillance inside private spaces. Security assigned to my sister only with her consent. My shop stays open under my name. My mother's care cannot depend on whether I remain married to you. Debt litigation continues even if the marriage ends. 6 months maximum unless I renew. Public appearances limited to listed events. If your family threatens me, I can leave the residence immediately and the legal support remains. His counsel's brows rose slightly. Attorney Seo looked proud in a way she would deny under oath. Tae-gun read to the end. Add 1 clause. My stomach tightened. What clause? If you decide the arrangement damages you more than it protects you, you may terminate with 72 hours' notice. No penalty. I stared at him. That helps me. Yes. Why suggest it? Because trapped people make poor allies. Attorney Seo tapped her pen once. That sentence is almost ethical. Yong Il-do coughed into his hand. Tae-gun ignored both of them. The negotiation took 4 hours. I learned that Tae-gun needed a registered spouse within 4 days before the family council certified the succession slate. The household clause in his father's will had been written to prevent committee control, but a branch led by his second uncle, Yeo In-ho, had tried to force an alliance with a family that would make Tae-gun ornamental. If Tae-gun failed, In-ho's committee would assume management of the foundation, including the literacy program, the medical charity supporting my mother's clinic, and enough shell subsidiaries to keep prosecutors tired for a decade. We registered the marriage 2 days later at a district office where a clerk with pink nails asked no questions because wealthy men made paperwork quiet. I signed my name beside Yeo Tae-gun's and felt no romance at all. The pen dragged slightly on the paper. My signature looked like it had hesitated, which annoyed me because my hand had been steady. Tae-gun noticed. When the clerk stepped away to copy the documents, he uncapped his own pen and placed it beside mine. Use this for the residence forms, he said. Your pen writes better. It does not drag. I tried it. He was right. I did not thank him. He did not ask me to. Moving into his house felt less like entering luxury than entering a museum after hours. The Seongbuk property had several wings, a staff trained to vanish, and family members who appeared at mealtimes with the precision of weather warnings. My room overlooked a courtyard maple. It had its own lock, which I tested in front of Tae-gun while he stood in the doorway. "Does that offend you?" I asked. "No." Many alphas enjoy being offended by locked doors. Many alphas are poorly raised. That is either self-awareness or arrogance. Both can be accurate. He handed me a folder. Inside were residence rules revised in tracked changes, security routes, public event schedule, household staff contacts, emergency protocols. Several sections had notes in his handwriting. Private room not entered without permission except fire/medical emergency. Shop access not restricted. Family meals optional unless listed. No scent-related language in press materials. I looked up at him after reading that last line. "You included that. You said no biology as theater." "I said that in an email at 2 a.m. I read emails at 2 a.m. That is not a personality." "No," he said, "it is a defect." I almost laughed. He saw it and looked away first, which felt like a small courtesy. The first family dinner taught me more about the Yeo household than the folder of rules had. In-ho smiled with too many teeth, Aunt Myung-hee watched like an auditor with blood relatives, and Jae-ryul quietly translated every pause under his breath. When In-ho asked whether my small family would be difficult to manage, Tae-gun said my family was under his protection. I looked at him sharply. He corrected himself in front of the table. "With my consent." 3 plain words, but every person there understood that he had chosen my dignity over the faster language of ownership. Later, I told him not to speak of me as if I were a warehouse. He said he understood, and for once I believed the understanding would change his next sentence. That night, Soyeon called from her dorm and told me Ms. Kwan had asked before assigning security near campus. She had agreed to 2 escorts a week, no entering buildings, and no reports to me unless she permitted it. Then she added that she had joined a student clinic group documenting illegal debt pressure. I objected. She hung up. My sister was becoming harder to protect and much easier to respect. Our marriage became public before it became personal. There were foundation meetings, a hospital donor luncheon, a family memorial ceremony, and one press photograph taken from so far away, my face looked like a rumor. At each event, Tae-gun followed the boundaries with a precision that felt less like warmth than discipline. He offered his arm only when cameras approached and released me the instant we passed them. He asked before touching my back to guide me through crowds. He never entered my room. He did, however, send household staff into mild panic by having a second workbench installed in an unused sunroom after he noticed me rubbing my wrist from carrying tools between the shop and the house. I confronted him beside the new bench because gratitude made me itchy. "I didn't ask for this." "No." "Then why?" "You have been repairing books on a dining table that is too low. Your wrist swelled yesterday." "You were looking at my wrist during the memorial ceremony?" "The ceremony was 3 hours. There was time." "That sounds more unsettling than considerate." "I can remove the bench." I ran my thumb along the smooth edge. It was exactly the right height. Oi! The light from the courtyard fell across it without glare. Someone had chosen the surface to resist moisture but not scratch paper. "No," I said grudgingly. "It can stay." "I will inform the staff the invasion was successful." I looked at him. He looked back. The sentence had been delivered in the same severe tone he used for board matters. I laughed once before I could stop myself. His gaze dropped to the bench as if he preferred looking at wood to seeing what laughter did between us. Jae-ryul became my unofficial translator for the Yeo household. He told me which aunt asked questions because she cared and which asked because she counted ammunition. He also spent increasing time in the sunroom pretending to read while I worked. One afternoon, his hand tremor worsened badly enough that he dropped a teacup. Porcelain broke across the floor. He froze, face drained, as if broken cups carried sentences in that house. His shoulders lowered. Later, he told me he had a neurological condition that stress made worse and that In-ho used it to argue he was unfit for foundation leadership. Jae-ryul did not want power. He wanted the family scholarship clinic moved out from under In-ho's branch before patients became bargaining chips. "You could help," he said. "I repair books. You also read documents. Tae-gun says you notice what trained auditors miss because you think like paper." He said, "I think like paper?" With respect. That is worse. But I agreed to review old foundation ledgers, partly because the clinic supported my mother's ward, partly because Jae-ryul asked as a person rather than a prince looking for a servant, and partly because I was beginning to understand that Tae-gun's war with his family had edges touching people who never entered his house. The ledgers arrived in archival boxes smelling of dust and cedar. For 2 evenings, I worked beside Jae-ryul while Tae-gun took calls in the next room. I found irregularities where ink density changed on donation receipts, places where paper batches did not match the dates printed on them, and 3 pages removed from a bound ledger, then replaced badly enough that the stitch holes told on them. Paper did hide better than people, but only if people respected it. When I showed Tae-gun, he did not praise me. He asked 6 specific questions, listened to every answer, and then called Jung Il-do. After he hung up, he said, "This may protect the clinic." May. Yes, I will not overstate it. Good. You found what 2 internal auditors missed. That sounded dangerously close to a compliment. It was a report. I prefer invoices. Send one. I did. He paid it from the foundation's audit budget, not his personal account. I checked. The first real crack in the arrangement came from So-yeon. She arrived at the house on a Saturday with a backpack, 2 clinic pamphlets, and a face that told me she had done something brave and inconvenient. "I joined the legal testimony group," she said before removing her shoes. "We are filing statements from families pressured by debt collectors connected to hospital payments." No. Try a longer sentence. It will still be wrong. Tae-gun, who had come to the entry hall at the staff's announcement, stayed silent. I rounded on him. "Do not stand there like a judge." "I was planning to stand here like furniture." So-yeon blinked. "He makes jokes?" "Rarely, and with poor lighting." She looked unimpressed by both of us. "I am giving testimony. I am not asking permission. You're putting your name where In-ho's people can see it. They already photographed me. Silence didn't protect me." The words struck harder because they were true. My first instinct was to forbid, arrange, block, protect. Tae-gun watched me, and I hated that he probably understood the instinct because he had been trained by the same fear in more expensive rooms. "What would make it safer?" he asked So-yeon. I turned. "Do not encourage her." "I am asking her." So-yeon lifted her chin. "Independent counsel for the student group. No Yeo lawyers. A secure way to submit evidence. And if your family tries to bury it, we release copies to 3 newspapers." Tae-gun nodded once. "Attorneys Seo can recommend counsel. I will not choose them." So-yeon looked suspicious. "That easy?" "No." His voice remained even. "Oh, but simple." My sister looked at me. "See? The terrifying Alpha understands consent better than you right now." "I regret introducing everyone," I muttered. She hugged me before leaving, hard and quick. Into my shoulder she whispered, "You can worry. You can't own my risk." After she left, I walked into the courtyard because the house air felt too warm. Tae-gun followed only as far as the doorway. "You think I'm wrong," I said. "I think you are frightened." That is not an answer. It is the part I can say without assuming authority over your family. Rain threatened but did not fall. The maple leaves had begun to redden at the edges. I folded my arms. When did you learn to make fear sound like policy? He looked toward the stone path. Young. I waited. He said nothing else. A month earlier, I might have filled the quiet with irritation. That day, I let it stand until he chose whether to cross it. My father tried to separate legitimate business from the family committee, he said at last. He believed documents could restrain blood. He was wrong about the speed, not the principle. The jacket was his. Yes, you gave it to me. You were shaking. You said I was soaked. You were also shaking. I did not know what to do with the correction. It made the lobby return to me. The child, the rain, the heavy fabric on my shoulders. He had seen fear I had pretended was cold. That jacket caused half this mess, I said. No, my family caused this mess. The jacket only failed to lie. That sentence stayed with me longer than it should have. The emotional turn, if I must name it now, from the far side of everything, did not happen with a kiss or a confession. It happened in a records room under the old wing, with dust on my fingers and Tae-gun standing 3 shelves away from me like a man facing trial. We had gone there because Jae-ryul remembered seeing older clinic transfer papers before In-ho's branch took over. The room held family records dating back decades, sealed boxes, photographs, coats wrapped in muslin, and air dry enough to make my skin tighten. Tae-gun unlocked a cabinet and removed a flat box. Inside lay the black jacket. I had assumed he kept it in a wardrobe. Instead, it rested among memorial items with a label written in his hand. Yeo Seong-ho, winter formal jacket, repaired 2014. The repair was visible only if one knew where to look. Inside the left sleeve, a patch had been stitched with thread a fraction darker than the lining. I touched the air above it, not the fabric. Who repaired it? I did, Tae-gun said. I looked at him. You sew? Poorly. The stitches were not poor. They were careful, uneven in the way of a beginner refusing to rush. He opened a small envelope tucked under the jacket. Inside was a strip of torn lining and a note, written in an older hand. If you cannot save the house, save the people trapped inside it. Do not mistake inheritance for duty. My father left it in the pocket, Tae-gun said. I found it after the funeral. His face remained controlled. His thumb, however, rested on the edge of the note with such restraint that my chest hurt. He was not asking for comfort. He had not meant me to see grief. We had opened the box looking for clinic papers, and grief had been filed in the same room because families like his stored everything useful beside everything unbearable. Why keep fighting for the chair if he told you not to mistake inheritance for duty? I asked. Because In-ho would use it to destroy people who cannot survive private wars. People like my mother. Yes. People like Jae-ryul. Yes. People like you. His hand left the note. Less relevant. Conveniently false. He looked at me then, and for the first time, I saw exhaustion before he hid it. Not weakness, not softness. A man who had built an entire life around being the wall and had forgotten walls also cracked from weather. I gave you the jacket, he said, voice low, because for one moment I did not calculate. That is rare enough that my family recognized it before I did. The records room seemed to shrink around us. I wanted to step closer. I did not. Wanting had become a fact, but facts were not instructions. Did you regret it? I asked. No. That is a dangerous answer. I know. We found the clinic transfer papers 20 minutes later. In-ho's branch had moved charitable funds through a private debt intermediary, linking patient subsidies to collection pressure. It was enough to begin a public case if handled correctly, and enough to make In-ho strike if mishandled. As we left the records room, Tae-gun placed the note back under the jacket, but did not close the box immediately. "You can still leave," he said. "We have discussed the exit clause." "I am not discussing the clause." I understood. The records, the testimony, the family vote, the increasingly personal way his gaze found me across rooms, all of it had made the contract heavier. Leaving had become less simple because staying had begun to mean something beyond survival. That frightened me more than threats. "I'm not leaving tonight," I said. He nodded as if I had given him a report, but his shoulders lowered by a degree. In-ho made his move 2 days before the council vote. The first article appeared at dawn. Private citizen husband of Yeo Hae linked to fraudulent debt. It included my shop address, blurred photographs of So-yeon, and a line implying my mother's clinic care had been purchased in exchange for marriage. By 7, reporters stood outside Paper House. By 8, customers canceled appointments with apologetic messages. By 9, the loan company sent a formal demand for accelerated payment based on reputational risk, which was not a legal term so much as a threat wearing shoes. Tae-gun came to my room at 9:12 and knocked once. "Come in," I said. He opened the door but remained in the hall. His jaw was set. "I can have the article suppressed within an hour." "How?" "Pressure on the publisher's parent company." "No. It exposes your sister." I said no. His hand tightened on the doorframe. "Min-jae. Do not use my fear to make me approve your family methods." The words hit him. I saw it. He stepped back as if I had drawn a line on the floor. "What do you want?" he asked. I wanted the article gone. I wanted my mother protected, my sister invisible, my shop unmarked by scandal. I wanted the world to be small enough for one powerful man to fix without staining anything else. Wanting that did not make it safe. "We answer with documents," I said. Attorney Seo releases the injunction filing, the forged seal analysis, and a statement that the debt company is under investigation. So-yeon's group releases testimony through their counsel, with names redacted. Jae-ryul releases the foundation audit summary. We do not bury the article. We bury the lie under heavier truth. That will expose the family before the vote. Yes. It may cost me votes from moderates who prefer quiet reform. Then they prefer quiet victims. His gaze held mine. Something in him settled, not soft, not easy, decided. "I will support it." "Even if it costs you the chair?" "Yes." "Don't say that because you think I need to hear it." "I am saying it because if I choose the chair by making you smaller, I become the committee with better manners." I had no answer ready for that. He left to call Jung Il-do. I called Attorney Seo. Then I called So-yeon, who said, "Finally," as if public scandal were an overdue bus. The response unfolded by noon. Attorney Seo's statement was surgical. The student council's release was careful, devastating, and impossible to dismiss as gossip. Jae-ryul, pale but steady, appeared at a foundation briefing and announced an independent audit into debt-linked patient funds. When a reporter asked whether he accused his own family branch of misconduct, he said, "I accuse documents of saying what they say." I knew immediately he had stolen the line from me. I was proud and annoyed. In-ho summoned Tae-gun and me to the old house that evening. The council would meet the next morning, but he wanted a private conversation first. That was how men like him described ambushes without witnesses. Tae-gun told me I did not have to go. "I know," I said. "You are going anyway." "Yes." "Why?" "Because they keep speaking about my life as if I'm absent. I'm tired of being convenient." He nodded and handed me an envelope. "Then read this before we leave." Inside was a dissolution agreement. My breath stopped for one beat. The document terminated the marriage contract immediately upon my signature, but preserved every promised protection. Legal fees paid into Attorney Seo's client trust, My mother's clinic support converted into a general patient grant unrelated to me. So-yeon Security prepaid for the semester if she accepted it. My shop's foundation program guaranteed through an independent board. The residence clause ended. Compensation remained for work already performed. No penalty, no non-disclosure beyond private family medical details. I read it twice. What is this? Freedom before tomorrow. I didn't ask to terminate. No, but In-ho will claim you cannot speak freely because you depend on the contract. I removed the dependence. And if I sign? Then you leave when you choose. And the succession condition? If our marriage dissolves before the vote, I may lose. I looked at him over the paper. You drafted your own defeat. I drafted your exit. Anger rose unexpectedly, hot and protective. Did you decide this alone? Yes. We had terms. We negotiated. You do not get to make freedom another thing you hand me from above. His expression altered very slightly. You are right. I know I'm right. That is not the issue. What is? I held up the document. The issue is, you still think choosing not to use me means deciding everything by yourself in a nobler direction. The room went quiet. Outside, staff moved somewhere in the hall. Tae-gun lowered his gaze to the agreement. For once, he looked genuinely at a loss, not because he lacked strategy, but because strategy had brought him to the edge of a human mistake and stopped being useful. What should I have done? He asked. He absorbed that single word as if it contained a manual he had never been given. Then he said, Min-jae, will you review this agreement with Attorney Seo and decide whether you want to sign before the vote? The correction should have been too late. Instead, it was clumsy enough to be real. I folded the papers carefully. Yes, I said, and I am still going tonight. In-ho received us in a formal room where the black jacket had first caused trouble. Yeo Tae-gun sat near the window. Aunt Myung-hee stood behind her chair. Jae-ryul was there too, one hand braced on his cane, face drawn but eyes clear. In-ho smiled when we entered. Such loyalty, he said, or desperation. They resemble each other from a distance. I bowed to the elders and sat before anyone invited me. Tae-gun sat beside me this time because we had discussed it in the car and I had chosen the seating myself. In-ho placed a folder on the table. You are creating noise that could damage everyone. Withdraw the audit, soften the testimony, and we will settle the debt matter privately. Your mother's care can continue. Your sister can study peacefully. Your little shop may even prosper. There it is, I said. His smile remained. There what is? The leash. You wrapped it in concern, but the shape is familiar. Yeo Tae-gun's eyes moved to me. Tae-gun said nothing. Good. I had asked him in the car not to speak before me unless In-ho threatened immediate harm. His silence was not absence, it was respect with teeth. In-ho sighed. Young man, you entered this family through arrangement. Do not mistake temporary affection for permanent standing. I don't. That seemed to please him until I continued. I also don't mistake family standing for truth. My father did not sign that debt. My sister is not a bargaining chip. My mother's clinic bed is not your property. And Tae-gun's chair, if he keeps it by feeding you quiet victims, is not worth the wood it's built from. The room went still enough to hear rain begin against the windows. In-ho looked at Tae-gun. Will you let your husband speak to elders this way? Tae-gun answered, I am listening to him speak accurately. Yeo Tae-gun's mouth twitched. Aunt Myung-hee turned toward the window as if checking weather, though I suspected she was hiding approval. In-ho's mask thinned. You think the council will reward this spectacle? They fear instability. Jae-ryul spoke then, voice quiet but steady. They fear exposure more. The audit materials were sent to every voting member an hour ago. If they choose your committee tomorrow, they choose to inherit the investigation publicly. In-ho stared at him. You. Jae-ryul's hand trembled on the cane. He did not hide it. Me. Yeo Tae-gun looked at her grandson, then at Tae-gun, then at me. And the marriage? Tae-gun reached into his coat and placed the dissolution agreement on the table. Gasps moved through the room like disturbed birds. Min-jae has the option to end it before the vote, he said. All protections remain. No family member may contact his mother, sister, shop, clients, or counsel without written approval. The patient grant has been moved to an independent board. His legal trust is funded. He owes us nothing. In-ho laughed once. You fool! Tae-gun did not look at him. He looked at his grandmother. If the council wants a spouse as proof that I can establish a household, they may judge me by the fact that the man I married can leave without fear. If that disqualifies me, the condition was rotten. Yeo Tae-run's face changed in a way I could not read. Later I would learn that she had loved Tae-gun's father fiercely and failed him in the ways powerful parents often fail children, by admiring courage only after it was dead. In that room, she simply reached for the dissolution agreement and read the first page. You would risk the chair for this? She asked. Tae-gun's voice remained economical. Yes. For him? No, he said, and the answer struck me before he continued. For the right to stand beside him without holding the key to his cage. No one spoke. I stared at my hands because looking at him felt too revealing. He had not become fluent. He had said one exact thing and stopped before it became performance. That was worse for my composure. The council vote the next morning lasted 2 hours. I was not allowed inside, by rule and by my own preference. I waited in the sunroom with So-yeon, who had arrived carrying convenience store sandwiches and righteous blood pressure. Jae-ryul waited with us until a staff member called him away for procedural questions. Attorney Seo texted updates she was not supposed to have, because competent lawyers had networks that made official silence decorative. At 11:43, Jae-ryul returned. He looked pale enough to worry me, but he was smiling. Tae-gun won. So-yeon exhaled a curse. I sat down because my knees had made an independent decision. Margin? I asked. Enough. And In-ho? Removed from foundation oversight pending audit. Not destroyed. Men like him require paperwork, not lightning. That sounded like Tae-gun. I'm recovering from family influence. The dissolution agreement sat on the workbench between my bone folder and a stack of linen thread. I had reviewed it with attorney Seo that morning. It was clean, generous in a way that did not require gratitude to function. I signed it before Tae-gun returned because freedom offered but unused can become theater, and I needed both of us to know the old structure was gone. When he entered the sunroom after the vote, the house noise followed him from a distance. Aides, relatives, phones, the machinery of victory. He stopped when he saw the signed agreement. You signed, he said. Yes. So-yeon stood. I'm going to find food that wasn't made by rich ghosts. Jae-ryul went with her, claiming he needed to prevent her from insulting ancestral porridge. They left us in the sunroom among paper, tools, rain light, and the clean brutality of a completed ending. Tae-gun picked up the agreement, read my signature, and set it down. Then you are free to leave. Yes. Will you? I had expected the question. It still hurt, because he asked it without defense. No pressure, no persuasion. A man who had spent his life securing outcomes stood before an outcome he could not secure and kept his hands at his sides. I'm leaving the house, I said. His face did not change enough for anyone else to notice. I noticed. I understand. My shop opens at 9. My basil plant is probably dead. My neighbor has been feeding it tap water and insults. That is leaving the house. Yes. Is it leaving me? The question came out lower, still restrained, still him. I walked to the workbench and touched the edge of the dissolution papers. I don't know yet. He nodded once. Thank you for answering. That answer is not kind. It is honest. Do you hate that? No. His gaze moved to the window. I hate that I want to negotiate with it. I laughed quietly because that was exactly him and exactly the problem. Do not. I won't. I moved back to Paper House that evening. Tae-gun did not send a car until I asked for one, and when he did, Ms. Kwan drove without comment and carried only the boxes I pointed to. My room above the shop smelled of paper dust, old wood, and the basil plant's dramatic decline. I slept poorly, woke early, fixed the hinge again, and opened the door to 3 real customers and 1 journalist pretending to need a dictionary rebound. I refused the journalist and gave a discount to a grandmother whose cookbook had survived 2 floods and 1 grandson with scissors. The following days did not become simple. I missed Tae-gun at inconvenient times, when a client misused legal language, when tea steeped too long, when a budget spreadsheet behaved badly. Missing him did not answer whether I should return. I met So-yeon for noodles and she told me she had given testimony in person. Her hands shook afterward, she admitted, but she had done it. The student group was pushing hospitals to adopt reporting protocols for debt coercion. She spoke with a force that did not need my permission. I listened and practiced being proud without being controlling. Jae-ryul visited the shop twice, once to bring foundation paperwork, and once because he said the house felt over-seasoned with elders. His tremor had eased. He had been appointed interim director of the Patient Grant Board, with Aunt Myung-hee watching the finances like a hawk trained in tax law. He asked me to design accessible record books for families tracking care expenses. I charged him properly. He paid without flinching. Tae-gun did not visit for 11 days. He sent no gifts, no dramatic apologies, no expensive solutions disguised as weather. He emailed once about the foundation program, using a formal tone that made me want to throw my shoe at the monitor. At the bottom, below his signature, he added, C17 is correct now. I stared at that line for a long time, then replied, Miracles occur. He answered, Rarely without revision. I hated how pleased that made me. On the 12th evening, he came to Paper House carrying the black jacket in a garment bag. Rain had begun again, softer than the first night. He stood outside until I unlocked the door. You know you can enter shops, I said. That is the business model. You had a customer. I had a delivery man asking for directions. He looked confused enough to be a customer. I let him in. He placed the garment bag on the counter with care. I would like to commission a repair. I knew before opening it. My throat tightened anyway. This jacket does not need repair. The lining near the inside pocket has begun to loosen. I unzipped the bag. The memorial jacket lay inside, black wool still carrying the gravity of its history. The seam near the pocket had indeed loosened, though barely. Another owner might never have noticed. Tae-gun noticed everything he feared losing. You trust me with it? I already did. That was rain panic. No, he said. It was the first honest decision I had made in some time. I touched the lining lightly. This will take a week. I won't alter the original stitching. I know. And I'll invoice you. I assumed. And while it is here, you can come by after closing to discuss what you want done. Discussion is included in the fee. His gaze lifted. Only discussion? For now. The answer entered the room and sat between us, less frightening than before because no contract stood behind it, tapping its foot. Tae-gun nodded. For now is acceptable. He came 3 times that week. The first visit, we discussed thread color and his father's note. The second, he brought clinic documents for Jae-ryul and stayed to help me lift a heavy press because I asked, then left when I said I needed to work alone. The third, he arrived with barley tea from the convenience store because he had learned, apparently through observation and not espionage, that I forgot to brew my own when concentrating. "Do not look proud," I said, taking it. "I bought tea. Pride would be excessive." "You say that, yet your eyebrows disagree." He touched one eyebrow as if checking its discipline. I laughed. He watched me for a moment too long, then looked at the jacket on the bench. The kiss happened on a Thursday after rain, with the shop closed and the repaired lining smooth under my palm. I had finished the final stitch while Tae-gun stood at the window reading So-yeon's public statement in the newspaper. Her name was not printed, but we knew which paragraph held her words. He folded the paper carefully. "She writes like you," he said. "Better. More violent punctuation. Effective." I cut the thread and set down the needle. "The jacket is finished." He came to the bench. I handed it to him. For once, he did not take it immediately. "Min-jae." "Yes." "I want to ask before I misread courage as permission." My mouth went dry. "Ask." "May I kiss you?" The room held paper dust, rain, barley tea, the faint metallic scent of my scissors. No cameras waited. No council vote depended on the answer. My mother's care did not hang from it. My sister's safety did not require it. The legal trust existed whether I stepped forward or back. Freedom stood in the room, awkward and plain, giving desire nowhere to hide. "Yes," I said. He moved slowly enough that I could change my mind and steadily enough that I did not feel asked twice. His hand came to my cheek with a restraint that made space instead of taking it. The kiss was quiet, careful at first, then less careful when I gripped the front of his coat and pulled him closer. It did not solve grief. It did not erase contracts, debts, articles, family rooms, or the years that had taught both of us to distrust shelter. It simply existed, chosen and returned, and when we parted, he rested his forehead near mine without leaning his weight on me. "I wanted that too much," he said. "Terrible confession." "Accurate report." "You need new categories." "I am learning." We did not remarry quickly. First came the work of living separately without pretending. Distance erased anything. The tabloids moved on once the audit produced arrests boring enough to be real. My uncle admitted he had delivered my father's seal to the loan company, and attorney Seo dismantled the debt with the satisfaction of a surgeon removing a splinter from a nerve. My mother's clinic support moved under the independent grant. So-yeon finished the semester with terrifying grades and began volunteering with the legal nursing project. Tae-gun stayed chair, but he spent the first months cutting his family's old leashes one procedure at a time. At Paper House, he was less formidable. He fixed my front door hinge, lost an argument with wheat paste, and learned to wait at the counter instead of stepping behind it. Before we registered again, we made a practical agreement about privacy, property, medical decisions, work, and the right to be angry without anyone mistaking anger for abandonment. Attorney Seo said romance should never require so many clauses. I told her men from criminal families did not get a discount on paperwork. She approved the document anyway. On the first snow of winter, Tae-gun arrived before closing with 2 paper cups of barley tea and no security visible except Ms. Kwan pretending to examine oranges across the street. I locked the shop, tested the silent hinge, and took the black jacket from its hanger. Tae-gun looked at it, then at me. "It belongs with you," I said. He did not reach for it. "It has been safe here." "That is not the same as belonging." "No." I held it open. For once I put his jacket on his shoulders. The repaired lining settled smoothly, the old note hidden near his heart, the stitches I had added lying beside the ones he had made years before. He stood very still while I adjusted the collar. "There," I said. "Try not to start a family scandal on the way home." "I make no promise." "You are impossible." "So I have been told by my husband." The word no longer felt like a title someone else had mistaken me for in a hallway. It felt like a key we had both filed down until it opened from either side. Outside, snow softened the streetlights and gathered on the repaired sign above Paper House. Tae-gun offered his hand without assuming I would take it. I took it after making him wait just long enough to see his eyebrow lose discipline, and together we stepped into the falling snow, leaving the shop door quiet behind us.